There's something in breastfeeding that we cannot duplicate.
Breastfeeding is the norm. Really has to happen before birth.
Getting education before the baby is born is vital.
It's very important to talk to mom about feeding prior to the baby being born. We start the conversation. Have you thought about how you would like to feed your baby? Is there any questions you have? Do you have any concerns? What is your experience if it's not the first baby? What has been your experience? Because our patients will come to see their family doctors for other reasons, and there's a lot of advertisement about breastfeeding, about skin to skin. If they're in that age range where they're thinking about having children, it might sort of start that thought process even before they become pregnant.
Working in the clinic, when we see moms throughout their pregnancy, there's ample opportunity there to ask them casually, have you thought about breastfeeding, or have you thought about your feeding plan, and kind of taking that opportunity to plant the seed. We don't have a lot of time, but it's enough time to kind of get them also aware of the fact that we support breastfeeding, and if there is anything that they wanted to learn more about, then we're able to provide that education and information. I think the first thing is that we would touch on, the benefits to breastfeeding for both baby and mom. I think once we review those things, there's a lot of times that information isn't known. Oftentimes surprises mom, and they're not aware, and they often will say, well, I didn't realize there was so many benefits to myself.
Yeah.
I knew that it was good for baby, but I had no idea what it could do for me.
It just allows us to sort of investigate misconceptions, and has resulted in some moms that seem to be intent on formula feeding sort of reconsider that.
I think it was really important to discuss breastfeeding before he was actually born, because it kind of gave the nurses an idea of my history and kind of what my plan was with how I was planning to feed my baby. I had struggles with my first, and that kind of carried over into what my plan was with Colin, because I was really worried with supply issues if breastfeeding would be successful this time around. So being able to be on the same page as the nurses, they were better able to help support me in my plan with him.
Getting them to discuss with us, what are their thoughts? What are their wishes? In a perfect world, how would you see yourself with a new baby? And sort of giving them some guidance on decisions that they make based on that. Letting them know that they have the support ongoing, and giving information based on evidence without judgment. I'm finding that that's really having a lot of real positive feedback from the patients and feeling supported regardless of their feeding choices.
Knowing how much research supports the benefits of breastfeeding and the bond and the health benefits, I think I really struggled with missing out on that the first time. And so I think that was a huge factor in me really wanting to kind of give it a go again this time and really make an effort to breastfeed.
It's important to sort of put it in perspective of cost, and not to pressure them, but to sort of think of it from a different perspective. So for a mom that has made the informed decision to formula feed, we continue to offer support with feeding her infant. First is giving her formula preparation instructions, talking about skin to skin, talking about feeding on demand is important for good feeding practices for formula-fed babies as well as breastfed babies.
So what we're doing is setting up a template for all practitioners, nurse practitioners, the RPN, the RN, the registered dietitian, to ensure that breastfeeding and informed infant feeding is part of our process. So it's around analyzing what you're doing and how you're documenting it, and then putting in process to increase everyone's confidence around talking about infant feeding, around, motivational interviewing, around, talking about that breastfeeding isn't just a lifestyle decision. It's, there's risks of not breastfeeding, and having everyone feel confident in that just having those counseling appointments with patients, and then setting up a template to make sure that there's reminders, so making it as easy as possible for everyone to implement the standard approach.
I actually made can I have my pamphlets? So I pamphlets in 9 different languages about the importance of breastfeeding. Our doctors are going to hand this out in one of the first visits, ask them to read it in their language, and also English as well. And then when they come back, they're going to actually talk about breastfeeding as well. And our midwives actually love this whole idea.
They talk about it in the prenatal class or breastfeeding classes, and then you hear it from the nurses, you hear it from the lactation consultants, you hear it at a breastfeeding course. I think the repetition really helps to make it stick.
Once you decide not to breastfeed, you can't necessarily reverse that decision. And so I want you to make the best decision for you and your baby with the best information that I can give to you. It is a stepwise, process-oriented approach, and that's what BFI gives you those tools to put in place best practice.